was reading on ESPN.com earlier today. Bill Barnwell has his annual story up, ranking the NFL wide receiver, tight end, and running back groups, so the offensive skill position groups for 2025. So this is not a forecast for the next 4 years or a salary cap situation. This is purely looking at what you did last year, what you got on the books for this year, and what these guys might do in terms of their production this year. And I was actually surprised. I'd kind of forgotten where the Saints fell in this list last year. They were 14th. Oh, sorry, my mistake. I misread. They were 14th 2 years ago. They were last year 25th, which makes some sense. And you're kind of running it back this year with much of the same. You've added Brandon Cooks, obviously, and potentially your running back shuffle is going to look a little bit different behind Kamara. Probably looking at a little bit more from Kentre Miller, but it's basically the same cast of characters, and that is reflected in the grade, which is just one spot up at 24th. And I think that has to do a little bit with Rashid Shaheed, when he was on the field, really emerging as one of the better deep threats, at least in the NFC, if not in the NFL as a whole. I broke this little blurb by Bill Barnwell down into two different pieces. One is he is curious what to do with Chris Olave. He was fourth in ESPN's receiver score, but limited to 6 games and a handful of snaps and 2 others because of the concussions, which, by the way, is now 4 in 3 years, which we know very well. Barnwell calls Olave a legitimate number one receiver when on the field, but it's impossible to form any realistic projection for how often we'll see the 25-year-old this season. To me, with concussions, it's unlikely that Chris Olave loses a step. Like, this is not a second ACL tear or a significant fractured leg or like some sort of deal like Steph Curry or Mahomes where their ankles don't work half the time. Like, this is a guy who physically, in terms of running, jumping, catching, all the things required to do by the NFL receiver, he's still well within his prime. It's just a matter of whether or not his head will cooperate. And that's something we can't really know. It's certainly terrifying. One, as Chris Olave, two, as Saints fans to a much lesser degree, but when you're rooting on the team. But you've drafted this guy in the first round, and he's shown over 2 seasons he's a 1,000-yard receiver if he's healthy. But is he going to be healthy? So to me, you would just grade him as a 1,000-yard receiver. Like, sure, concussions happen frequently, and if you get one, you're more prone to others down the line. But, like, to me, I would look at Chris Olave as a legitimate 1,200-yard receiver in the NFL given reasonable quarterback play. And that's not a given, but we're not grading the quarterbacks. We're just grading the skill guys. So if you give them league average quarterback play, he's going to be a 1,000-yard guy. And then the second piece of this that I find interesting, and these are some statistics that Barnwell dug up, he said, as for Alvin Kamara, it might be time to face reality. He's spent half his career with Drew Brees and half without. And he's been a different running back without an elite passing game to make his life easier. Barnwell writes, though he's still an effective receiver on a per-route basis by running back standards, he's probably miscast as a 3-down back and would be far more effective as the receiving back in a rotation. I think part of that is true. The part that suggests that a running back's life is much easier with Drew Brees under center is very obvious. That doesn't make it less true. It is very obvious. I would suggest if you gave Alvin Kamara Philadelphia's running back and Jalen Hurts, Philadelphia's running back, Philadelphia's offensive line and Jalen Hurts, that he would still be a great 3-down runner. The Saints' offensive line last year was a mash unit. The year before that, it was a mash unit. So, yeah, his productivity has dropped off post-Drew Brees, but so has the offensive line play. So, while I completely understand casting a shade of doubt on Alvin Kamara's future the next 2 years at 30 and 31 years old, I'm not just solely going to pin this on Drew Brees not being there. It hurts. It's not the sole factor. They've got to do a better job on the offensive line of staying healthy and then blocking. And right now, the Saints offensive line has a chance to be very good. If McCoy is healthy, he's a top 5 center. If Fuaga takes a step from year 1 to year 2, he is at worst a league average right tackle, at best leaning towards a Pro Bowl right tackle. And if Banks is as good as Fuaga was last year, he's at least league average as well. And we think Cesar Ruiz is league average. We'll see what Penning can give him on the other side. But there's at least a chance that the Saints offensive line is good. You could have, it's not out of the question that the Saints have 2 Pro Bowl offensive linemen this year. You would not fall out of your chair if I told you that Eric McCoy made the Pro Bowl. You would not fall out of your chair if I told you Taliese Fuaga made the Pro Bowl. Would I bet my money on either one of them making the Pro Bowl? No, but they could be that level of player. And Banks, the potential's limitless on him. Certainly, it's better than whatever the Saints were trotting out there in week 8 last year, where you were literally the last 2 years signing guys off the street to go play and start on your offensive line. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater with Kamara just because Brees isn't there. Let's look at something else. So to me, I'm not going to ding Olave too hard on injuries that don't impact his ability to play the position. They just impact his ability to get on the field, if that makes sense, right? Like a knee injury can compromise your ability to play wide receiver. A concussion limits your ability to literally get on the field. If he's literally on the field, he's good. And if Kamara gets better blocking, he's good. And Shaheed, in his role, is good. Now, beyond that, I don't know. I didn't like the Cook signing. I don't like the tight end spot great. So I'm not clamoring for Barnwell to move the Saints off the 24th spot here. I think that is completely fair given the circumstances. Because it's not a guarantee that Olave plays, and it's not a guarantee that the Saints offensive line is very good for Kamara. But I think some of the nitpicking he's doing here can be pushed back on a little bit. So you see where this puts the Saints in the NFC South. Well, behind the Saints is the Bears, Giants, Jets, Bills, Browns, Patriots, Panthers, and Titans. So only one group here is worse than the Saints. And that brings me kind of back around to Carolina, which I've told you time and time again, I don't want to constantly compare the Saints to their divisional peers because I don't think that's a great barometer when you're looking at what the ultimate goal is, which is competing to win the NFC and to get into the Super Bowl and to win it, which not this year is not going to happen, but that's why you literally form a franchise. So I'm not going to just try to be the tallest short person here. I'm trying to get towards the top of the league, but if we are going to compare them to the Panthers in this vacuum, I will suggest that they are doing things poorly because they're toward the back end of what the Saints are on the front end of, which is surrounding your young quarterback with the best ecosystem possible. And if Bill Barnwell is telling you that the Panthers are 31st in their skill positions around Bryce Young, you're making life hell for Bryce Young, and that's what the Saints have to guard against with Tyler Shuck. So you need Olave, who's still in his mid-20s, and Shaheed, who's still in his mid-20s, and then either Neal or Miller at running back to emerge a little bit, and you need that position group to come along. You've spent your resources on the offensive front, and that should be settled here for the time being. Now it's time to be aggressive in the draft, in free agency next year if some money comes available, and go get him the weapons he needs to be successful. I don't know that you have them right now. Bill Barnwell says you're right there at number 24, so that's not a great ecosystem. In year one, that's okay. It's going to be drinking out of a fire hose for Tyler Shuck. It just is. It would be easier if he had the Eagles supporting cast, but that's not necessarily the spot that everybody comes into. It would be easier if he had Brock Purdy's San Francisco supporting cast. Not the case for everybody. And Josh Allen's making it work with what Barnwell says is a worse supporting cast than what the Saints have. But if you can keep him upright this year and keep Olave healthy this year, you can be okay. But I think the next piece to the puzzle for Shuck is going to get some pieces around him behind that offensive line that make the Saints offense hum a little bit more. So I don't think this is an unfair ranking. I push back on some of the detriments to the Saints here. But ultimately, these guys have got to go out there and play and get it done. Barnwell says they're 24th in offensive skill position playing right this very second. We'll just see.
Hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.